So, I've never really done a follow-up video before, at least not on a specific product, but I have, um, my family has been the owner of a Tesla for a year now, and I just wanted to go over my experience. Incidentally, you will notice too, new camera angle, probably different sound quality. Um, that's because I am now on my new MacBook Air. As you can see by this desktop, I am now officially running Big Sur. Now, one of the side effects, I just wanted to get you guys to let you know for future videos. One of the side effects is going back to a smaller screen, having not used a laptop in 5 years. I am going to have to start using my magnification again. So, for those of you who maybe were not used to it, this is how I used to use a computer, and it looks like I'll be going back to doing that at least part of the time if I'm not hooked up to a bigger display over AirPlay or um, physical connection. Um, really quick before I jump into the business with the Tesla, I am loving this computer. I'm not going to go over all the specifics. There are too many videos on that. I just end up repeating everybody else. But suffice it to say, this thing is quick. This thing is very fuel efficient. It is very fuel efficient. I have had this now for 2 weeks and I've only had to plug it in once. Okay. I plugged it in on January 5th, didn't plug it in again until January 12th. Okay. So that's how power efficient this thing is. If I use it, say 30 minutes to an hour a day, I can easily get a week out of this thing on one charge. And that's with putting it to sleep and not shutting it down. So I'm just loving this thing. It's fantastic. So back to the business with Tesla. So for those of you who do not know, my family um, owns a Tesla Model 3, and we just absolutely love it. This is the exterior. We went with black with the chrome. Nowadays, if you want to get black, you have to not bother with the chrome. They updated the design for 2021. I personally think that taking away the chrome was, especially with the black, I think it was a bad decision. But that's just me personally. Um, a lot of people also complain about Tesla's overall build quality. And yeah, there are some mismatched panel gaps. I mean, nothing's perfect, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's about to fall apart. And I speak from experience because my family used to own, um, way back when I was little, we owned a Plymouth Voyager that by the time we got rid of that in 2004, it was literally falling apart. The trim was crumbling to pieces. The stereo didn't work. The van was making all kinds of strange noises. It was just, but we kept it for 16 years, and it was literally falling apart. So a lot of people complain about Tesla build quality. I honestly think that based on my personal experience, if as long as it's not physically falling to pieces, then I'd say it's a pass as far as I'm concerned. Um, Now, another thing the newer Model 3 does is that it has the double pane glass. Some people have said it doesn't really make a difference. I honestly couldn't tell you because I've never been in one. I don't know. But me personally, a year with this car, practically maintenance free. And I say practically maintenance free because there was one time when we did have to call maintenance out. Um, the really cool part was they came to us, and it was actually my fault. I accidentally missed a step and broke one of the power seat controls, but they were it was easy enough to get it fixed, and they checked the tires because we'd had a possible issue with the tires because they were losing pressure unexpectedly, and they said everything was fine, that it was just due to the weather. So I mean, other than that, 6,000 miles of trouble-free driving, and it's just incredible. So what exactly makes a Tesla tick? Well, first of all, actually, before we get to that, let me show you the interior. This is the interior, and for those of you who cannot see, basically what it is it's a flat dash arrangement, and you can feel sort of a rectangular opening. That entire opening is a single air vent, and then you might bump something with your arm as you run along that vent. That what you just bumped into is a 15.6-inch touchscreen. It basically, for those of you who have a 15-inch MacBook Pro, take the screen off of that and bolt it to the dash of your car, and that's what this is. And the entire interface for the vehicle, with the exception of some steering wheel controls and the power seats and windows, everything else, including the wipers, believe it or not, is in that touchscreen. And it does take some getting used to. Excuse me. But at the same time, there are so many features that we've come to take for granted. Keeping the air conditioning on in the summer, keeping the heat on in the winter, being able to know that we come back to a car that is not going to be burning hot or freezing cold is just fantastic. Being able to have all the cameras around for security has been a real plus. I just love that too. Nothing has obviously happened to the vehicle in terms of vandalism or anything, but my personal view is that the instant I turn off that mode, especially if it's in an area that I don't know, then something's going to happen. But that's just me. So just fantastic, fantastic features. One of the other things we really love about it is the map. This thing has got a Google driven navigation system, and it is fantastic. This map is the biggest one that we've ever seen in a vehicle. So let me turn on the magnifier and let me zoom in here on the image. Basically, what you have on the screen is about a quarter of the screen is taken up with driver information, and the remaining 3/4 of the screen is this giant map. And it's just fantastic. It keeps getting updated. Navigation has been just spot on. The only time it's ever been behind is if they're doing roadworks and rerouting and the map hasn't updated to compensate for that, especially if it's something temporary. But it's just been overall a fantastic experience. So now we've seen the exterior and the interior. What makes this thing tick?
The time is now 4 p.m.
So what makes this thing tick? That's it. For those of you who cannot see, basically what you've got is your wheels, a big flat rectangle, and a cylinder. That's it. That is literally it. The cylinder is your electric motor as well as your inverter. And basically what that does is that it converts the power from the electric motor into more usable power for the wheels. But the size of the electric motor is order of magnitude smaller than your typical gas engine. And our car has 2 of them. We've got one motor in the back and one motor in the front, and that translates to all-wheel drive, and this thing is zippy. It is super easy to speed in a Tesla or any electric car that has similar performance credentials because it is so quiet and it is so instantaneous that you could end up at 50 and a 35 and not even realize it. Right? So you have to keep an eye on that speed because this thing is quick. Literally, like I said, all it is the electric motor and the battery. Obviously you have the electricals for the high voltage system. That's actually located underneath the rear seat. The primary drive electric motor, especially if you don't get the dual motor, you just get the single motor. The electric motor is basically located behind the rear seat and underneath the cargo floor. And the front motor is located, if you do opt for that, it is located in between the front trunk and the dashboard. So, what do I mean by front trunk? Now, not all electric vehicles have this, but depending on the way they're packaged, purpose-built electric cars, some of them, um, actually give you some extra storage up front where the internal combustion engine used to be, and all Teslas are like this, right? All Teslas are like this. The Porsche Taycan is like this. Um, the Volvo Polestar 2, actually, I should say the Polestar 2, which is its own brand, by the way. Polestar 2, Volvo XC40 Recharge, they're all like that. Not every vehicle is like that, though. The Chevrolet Bolt is not. The Mini Electric is not. The VW ID4 is also not. And it again comes down to packaging. Um, a lot of those cars that I just mentioned, particularly the Mini Electric, is an example of a gas car that's been converted to an EV. And as a result, they couldn't really do much with the packaging. But even purpose-built EVs like the VW ID4, like the Chevy Bolt, do forego that front trunk in order to allow for better packaging, either a shorter overhang at the front or improved room on the inside. Both, it's really an interesting mix, seeing what's coming out of the EV space. But typically, that's all there is the electric motor, the batteries, and that's it. So, much like your phone, you got to charge your car at some point, right? Well, how do you do that? There's actually a number of ways you can do it. One of which is with the home charger. Every electric vehicle will have the option to get a home charger, whether that be through the manufacturer or a third-party network. Amazon actually has some home chargers you can get. This is the example of the one that we use, is the Tesla wall connector. It's also used at hotels. If you go by a hotel and you may see something like this, an apparatus that looks like this, in that case, it's known as a destination charger, but it's literally the same thing. And what this does is it's hardwired into one's house, and it supplies the power to charge your car. Should you get this? I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say no for a very particular reason. We got it not realizing at the time that our car, and I should say that we also got it installed, so everything was all set up to go, ready to go, before we got the car, and before we realized that our car came with this. This is the mobile connector, and the mobile connector can be thought of as a laptop power brick for your car. It's got the same connector that plugs into the vehicle on one end, and then it coils around and plugs into this box, and that box regulates the power. It's the same sort of functionality as the wall charger, as the wall connector, I should say, because I should also stress that these are not chargers. The charging apparatus is actually built into the vehicle itself. These are basically glorified wall plugs. Speaking of wall plugs, this is one of the reasons why I suggest not getting the wall connector, because the wall connector with installation costs in about almost $1,000. At least it did for us. If you have a free dryer outlet in your home, in your garage, this mobile connector has a 20-foot cord, and for $35 as opposed to nearly $1,000, because again, this mobile connector comes with your vehicle, and it comes with a 110 plug that plugs into any 110 outlet. Now, I want to say that if you're going to do that, do not, under any circumstances, plug anything else into that 110 outlet. The reason is because the mobile connector is going to take every ounce of power that it can, because the car is going to demand it. You plug something else into that outlet while the mobile connector is plugged in, you're going to have major problems. However, again, if you have a dryer outlet, a 240, specifically what they call a NEMA, November Echo Mike Alpha, NEMA 14 50, then you can order from Tesla a $35 plug that you can just plug in to that mobile connector, and that's it. So if you have the setup already, you've got a free outlet. I would just pay the $35 and use the mobile connector. Um, but again, that's just me. And the other reason I would say go with the mobile connector and the NEMA 1450 is another reason. Even if you don't have a 240 outlet in your garage, you will need to install one, because while you can possibly get by on a 110, you could possibly get by on a 110, don't do it. Okay? 110 is like trickle charging your phone versus charging it with an iPad charger, right? So the iPad charger would be like your 240 volt outlet or your wall connector, right? Much better. You could get it charged overnight. If you're really low, most of the time you wouldn't even get that low, because realistically, unless you take a lot of long trips, you're not going to use all that much power at once. So realistically, it only takes a couple of hours on the wall connector to charge, say 10-20%. Whereas on the 110, it could take all night, maybe even a couple of days, depending on where your charge level is and how high you want to charge it. And again, like I said before, you plug in that 110 into a regular outlet. You should not, under any circumstances, plug anything else into said outlet. But no, back to the NEMA 1450. The reason I recommend installing that is because, number one, it's cheaper. Number two, in the event that if you ever want to sell your house, it would open up the door for other EV owners that may not have a Tesla. And actually, I'm going to go over some vehicles that might be of interest to those that don't like Tesla or don't want a Tesla. You know, they don't want to drink Elon Musk's Kool-Aid. However, there are some very good reasons for sticking with Tesla, and it also has to do with another charging option. You've got the wall connector. You've got the wall connector / destination charger. You've got the mobile connector. What about if you're on the road? This is where Tesla comes out on top. Oops. Really quick. So this is an example of a NEMA 1450. If you get one of these, you want to make sure to have the ground installed up, because that's how the plug is the plug for the mobile connector is designed. Because if you have it the other way around, then what's going to end up happening is you're going to put undue strain on that cable, and you don't want to do that. So again, going back to, so these are the home charging options. What if you're on the road? Supercharger network. This is, without a doubt, the best EV charging network I've ever seen. It is literally plug and play. What you do is you back your vehicle in, and for those of you who can see, you can see a vehicle plugged into one of the chargers down there at the far end. You back your vehicle in, and for those of you who cannot see, the charger is a rectangular apparatus. There's one for each parking space, and it's actually located in between the spaces, right? It's located on basically the left line of the parking space, because again, you're supposed to back in. The charger is located under the left tail light. Charging plug on the vehicle is located under the left tail light. So the best way to back in, I found, is if you align, there's a sign in between each supercharger, and it says Tesla vehicle parking only. If you line up that sign with the center of your rearview mirror, you've pretty much got it. You do not want to have the charger directly behind your vehicle, because if you do, it's going to put undue stress on the charging cable. Having filled all of that, this is incredible, okay? You know, when you go up to a gas pump, you have to select your grade, you start pumping the gas, then you got to make sure the credit card works, etc., etc. That's not how Tesla does things with the EV charging. And Electrify America is also catching up with their plug and charge technology that's coming later this year. What you do is you take the cord from the supercharger, you open up the charging flap again under the taillight, you plug in, and that's it. That is literally it. Because when you buy your vehicle, you'll need to register a payment method. And the reason is because so that things like supercharging are completely automatic. Or if you decide to go for the full connectivity package with the infotainment system, which includes things like live traffic, satellite view, etc., streaming radio if you want it, that costs $10 a month. And having a payment method already up with Tesla will allow you to will allow that payment to automatically be charged. And again, the same thing with the superchargers. It's literally plug and play. And again, Electrify America is starting to roll out this technology to certain vehicles as well, where when you buy the vehicle, you register with Electrify America, you give them the VIN of your vehicle and payment information, and that's it, right? But Tesla was the one who really started this. They were really out in front. They still are out in front, I think. That everybody else is starting to play catch up, and I think that this year we're really going to see an influx of charging infrastructure and of vehicle adoption, and it's just going to be fantastic. Now, as I said before, 1 year with the Model 3, and I would honestly highly recommend it. Now, for those of you who are wondering, well, the Model 3 is a luxury vehicle. And that's true, it's not cheap, but the price has come down. If you go for a base level Model 3, single rear motor, you go with everything base, right? The base color, which is white, the base interior, which is black, the base wheels, which they call the Aero wheels, and the single rear motor with 267 miles of range, you can get it for $38,000. Now again, that's not cheap, but that brings the price down to something that is within reach. Not necessarily affordable per se, depending on your situation, but certainly within reach of many more people. And I personally have been seeing a lot of Model 3s on the road. A lot of police departments are buying them now. Slowly but surely, I should say. Some taxi outfits are buying them now. It's just fantastic seeing this adoption. And I think that thanks to Tesla, everybody else is starting to take notice and they're starting to come out with their own vehicles. Speaking of which, what if you are in the market for an EV, but you don't want a Tesla, or you can't afford a Tesla? Well, there are a number of options. The Mini Electric. This is one of the more affordable options, especially if you qualify for the tax credit and you live in a state that has a sizable discount. You could actually get this car for under $20,000. This is an all-electric. I would say city runabout. You wouldn't want to necessarily take this on trips per se because it only has about maybe 150 miles of range on a charge. But if you want to get something, say as I said, a city runabout, take the kids to school, go out on errands, commute to work, this would be perfect. This would be perfect. If you're looking for something more family oriented, the Nissan Ariya is coming out. And incidentally, we talked about that tax credit just a second ago. Tesla no longer qualifies for it, but everybody else pretty much does. Although with the Nissan Leaf, I'm not sure if they still do. I can't say for sure. You'd have to look that up. But Mini definitely does, and everybody else on this list that I'm about to show you definitely does. So coming out here, this is the Nissan Ariya. It's a brand new all-electric compact SUV. And I was talking earlier about the lack of a front trunk, or as Tesla calls it, a frunk. The Ariya is an example where they decided to forego the frunk and instead package all the electrical components. As I showed you earlier with the Model 3, you've got the battery, the motors, and the wheels, and for the chassis portion, that's pretty much it. However, there is also various controllers, charging circuitry, all that. And Tesla's done such a good job, along with Porsche um, and a few others, such that they've been able to include front trunks. Nissan, on the other hand, decided to forego that front trunk design in favor of additional interior space. And to do that, they've had to package the charging controller and all the other electrical equipment underneath the hood. So, it's nice to have choice though. I mean, this is going to be a 300-mile all electric SUV, and I think that for a lot of people that may not necessarily like the idea of a luxury nameplate, this could be something to consider. Something else to consider too is the Chevrolet Bolt. Now the Bolt is about to be redesigned, replaced. Actually, at the time of this recording, its replacement is going to be out next month. But the Bolt is another example of a very affordable all-electric vehicle with very decent range. Um, Basically, it's mid 30s before tax credit, can be up to mid 20s. You could save almost $10,000. And again, that depends on your individual situation, of course, but it's still a very affordable, vehicle. And for somebody who maybe grew up with the vintage nameplates, wants to stick to the vintage nameplates, here you go. This is definitely an option, especially because the Bolt has been around for a couple of years and you could easily get a used one. Now, there are some caveats to look for when buying a used EV versus buying a used gas car. Most notably, you want to take a look and see how the prior owner has been driving it, how the batteries held up. But no, so there's definitely the option there. If you want something new though, and you're really cash strapped, yet at the same time you do qualify for that tax credit, if you can get the absolute maximum tax credit, then the Candy K27, if all you need is literally a commuter car and nothing else, like I would say groceries, commuting, and that's it. Because this thing only has a 60-mile range, but it costs $10,000. Now, let me speak to that for just a second. You know, you're thinking, oh, only 60 miles of range. I need more than that. I can understand. But let's take a look at this. The Nissan Leaf, which was one of the first mass market electric vehicles before the Model 3 even, that had about 80 or 90 miles of range, and that cost 30 grand when it came out, right? And again, that was before the tax incentives. So it wasn't cheap. It was mid 30s. For a Nissan, especially for a Nissan hatchback about the size of a Versa, that was expensive. You fast forward 10 years and you get that same sort of range, roughly 60, 70, 80 miles for $10,000 after tax incentives. Before tax incentives, it's under 20. So in 10 years, to have the overall price come down this much, I mean, that says we're making progress. The looks of the thing, I don't know. It's kind of like a mini got in bed with a smart car. It's really kind of weird. It's a teeny weeny little thing. But again, if all you need is a commuter car, I'd say give it a shot. You know, it's definitely worth it. Worth giving it a look. But I think the one that's really going to take off is this, the Volkswagen ID4. It's due out for rollout later this year. The very first editions will be coming out very shortly. And by 2022, we're actually going to have ID4s built here domestically in the United States, which is going to bring the cost with tax incentives down to the mid 20s. Okay, mid 20s for a very capable, family focused, runabout electric vehicle. This is going to sell, I think, like hotcakes. I would say that this and the Tesla Model 3 are probably going to be the two most widely seen EVs in the coming years. But no, I just think that after having lived with an EV for a year, I can tell you personally from experience that I would never want to go back to anything else. It's funny when you ride in an EV often enough and you get used to it, you get used to how quiet it is. Then you get back into a gas car and you actually start to realize little subtleties that you never noticed before. You're thinking, wow, this thing was really that loud? You know? You end up hearing little clanks and dings and such that you never really heard before because you've gotten used to the electric powertrain. It's just it's a very interesting experience. And for those of you who have not had the opportunity to ride in an electric vehicle, be it a Bolt, a Tesla, uh, a Mustang Mach-E, which is coming out, but it could also be, a lot of these, even with the well, no, probably not with the Candy because again, the short range, but everything else on this list, with the exception of the Candy and the Mini, because the Mini doesn't have enough doors, you could use those as ride sharing vehicles. And I think that for Uber and Lyft, they would be fantastic. So if you haven't had the chance to ride in an EV and you get the chance to, I would say definitely do it. Um, you'll be surprised. And as I said before, after a year of EV ownership, I don't think I'd personally want to go back to anything else. But what do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome and have a nice day.